Now,
Yes.
for those because those that are listening to this are definitely interested in Airbnbs. They may be
Yeah,
interested in Airbnb, something they already have. They may be interested in
sure.
just starting from scratch, like you
Mhm.
are, or doing something different, like you have done. If you can break down for us because it's an investment, right? So
Mhm.
how
Absolutely.
do you make money with an Airbnb? What do we really, maybe people, because I
Mm.
have an idea, right? But because I'm not in it, there might be some things that we may be missing, or maybe not considering.
Yeah, I would say the way that you make money is it's a pretty simple process. The most simplex way of doing it is just renting your place out on a nightly rate. And then of course you add a cleaning fee on there. You have all of that kind of stuff attached, so that goes into your overall revenue. But that's the simple way of how you make money with this. And the amount of money kind of depends on your property. I have seen some people make, million of dollars a year on their property, like a very unique, really expensive nightly rate kind of place. That is possible. I've seen people make, $5,000, $10,000 a year. So I think it kind of just depends more on your location, how you market your property, and what type of property you have. But for us, I can speak for the Dome. We almost have a year of data. So in December, it'll be a solid 1 year that we've been renting. My initial projection for revenue, I thought if we hit $30,000 in revenue, I'd be pretty stoked about that. I think we'll probably hit closer to 36,000 this year.
That's awesome.
And so it's great, but I will say that's your revenue, right? So a lot
Right.
of people hear that and they're like, oh, cool, I can do this. That's like half my salary. That's not necessarily the case. You have to back out all of your expenses. And because we DIY, we are a little bit luckier in the sense where the profit is higher. But I could see people going out and mortgaging cabins and stuff and getting themselves into a little bit of trouble because that expense, that mortgage is so expensive. So you do have to be kind of careful there too. But for us, that's kind of how much we make with the flower pot. I think we'll probably rent it at 200 to 250 a night, and then the cleaning fee will be attached to that too. So that's kind of what we're thinking there.
Now, is it, you've put a ton of work, and I know I've said that. Is it
It's fun.
easy as it people make it sound? Because, and granted,
No.
yours is a little different. You have created, you have built with your own bare hands, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
dome, and you do a lot with a flower pot. So, and some people think, oh, an Airbnb, just easy money. Is it easy as some people may think it
No.
is?
I don't think so. I think it can be, I suppose. If you buy a condo and you hire a property management company and you're trying to be as hands off as possible, you will not make as much money because property management companies are 20 to 25% of your revenue. And so it's going to be a little bit more costly. But the things that I think people think are going to happen more frequently don't. Like they're thinking you're going to have a lot more maintenance because you have way more people in there. I've actually found it's kind of the opposite. We have a cleaner that's going in pretty much, at least 3, 4 times a week. And she's constantly letting us know, like, hey, this is, this, we need to replace this. So I feel like because of that, we have more eyes on the property, that the maintenance portion is actually a lot less than I thought it would have been. So that was one thing that I thought was interesting, but it's certainly not easy. It's really tough because you are in the hospitality business when it comes to Airbnbs. You're not necessarily in the long-term rental business where you can be a little bit more hands-off. You have to be very involved in the hospitality and that guest experience. So that's something that you are constantly thinking about. You're constantly trying to figure out how to communicate better and more effectively with guests so that expectations are correct before they check in. It's not hard, but it is not easy either.
I think that's such a great key distinction between it's a hospitality business versus a
Yes.
long-term rental business. Now,
Right.
what other things you mentioned? Because you mentioned revenue, you also, and you mentioned that not all of that, that's not just what you take home because of maintenance and other things that you may have to pay. What other are some other things that people that you and your experience have seen people not consider or not be aware of when they're
Mhm.
starting out their Airbnb or looking to start out their Airbnb that you really want them to, hey, don't ignore
Think
this.
about this. Yes. The biggest one that comes to mind with unique Airbnbs specifically. So, unique ones tend to be tiny houses. They tend to be less than 500 square feet, not always, but typically. And they tend to be very unique by nature. So, if you're going that route, anything unique is going to be really hard to finance. So getting a bank to give you a loan for a flower pot shaped house is going to be next to impossible. Getting a loan for a tent, also really difficult. And so that's one thing that I don't think people understand. They see like a dome model or a tiny house and they're like, cool, I can do that for $25,000. And then you get into what does it take to make it a legal structure so you can legally rent that. And that's the part that I think really stumps a lot of people is it's very expensive because you have to fund all of that usually in cash or alternative financing. And so I don't think people quite understand quite how expensive it is, but I would say for very unique properties, you definitely need deep pockets. You really do. It's very expensive. And I think if you don't have a good financial foundation, I could see this legitimately bankrupting people if they're not careful. So it's really, really costly.
Especially now that you're seeing so many more unique properties
Yeah.
out there, I'm wondering now it gets me thinking, how are people funding those projects, right?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.